Good morning. Welcome to Backyard and Beyond. Well, have you seen the movie Fried Green Tomatoes? Actually, it was based on a novel called Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe and written by Fannie Flagg. That may be a name that some of you recognize. It was released in 1991, so this is a movie that's been around for a long time. But, if you mention it, most of the people I've talked to still have a positive reaction to it. It was a comedy drama, and it was... I think of it as being one of the first movies where Kathy Bates was a major star. It also included Jessica Tandy, Mary Louise Parker, and Mary Stuart Masterson. It tells the story of a Depression-era friendship between two women, Ruth and Edgy, and a 1980s friendship between Evelyn, a middle-aged housewife, and Ninny. Aren't those interesting names? An elderly woman who knew Ruth and Edgy. The centerpiece is a parallel story concerning the murder of Ruth's abusive husband and the accusations that follow. But remember, it is a comedy drama, and I'm sure you can rent it, get it if you haven't seen it, and catch up on Fried Green Tomatoes. Well, you may have guessed already. This is just an introduction to actually talking about green tomatoes. If you have some plants out there that have green tomatoes, you can still save them in a number of ways. Or you probably could get some at the farmer's market. I thought it was interesting a couple of weeks ago that a gentleman came to the farmer's market and wanted to purchase green tomatoes because there are a lot of things that you can do with green tomatoes. And it's always sort of sad to see, and we have pulled up some of our tomato plants because they froze. There are others that still have some pretty good-looking tomatoes on there. But it sort of is the signal for the end of summer and the beginning of fall when we start seeing those tomato plants freeze and not getting the tomatoes ripe before they freeze because, of course, those cooler nights just don't help the tomatoes to ripen. But you can do some interesting things with unripe green tomatoes. They will not taste like ripened tomatoes. They will be crunchy, of course, and slightly tart, and not taste like your regular tomato. But they're almost like a vegetable unto their own. And probably the most popular thing we hear of doing with green tomatoes is frying them, and you want to make sure that they are green, that they are not about ready to get ripe because they'll turn mushy. And basically it's like some other things like summer squash and some other things that you fry where you need to have a coating, and the generally mixed together coating: eggs, milk, flour. You could add a little cornmeal, breadcrumbs, add a little salt and pepper, and dip the tomatoes in there after you've sliced them up and fry them. And you can have fried green tomatoes. The cooking really brings out a unique flavor. As we say, not the usual tomato flavor, but a unique flavor. And I'm sure there are a number of recipes in your recipe books on the web, but basically it's dredging the tomato in a coating and then frying them. If that's not your favorite thing to do, well, another thing is to make relish. And actually it comes out tasting basically like the sweet pickle relish you buy at the store. It usually the relish includes, of course, the chopped up green tomatoes and some peppers, some onions, celery seed, mustard seed, some sugar and vinegar, and chop that all up, put it together, simmer it a little bit, and it will keep in the refrigerator for several weeks. But you could also put it in a boiling water bath and preserve it, use it throughout the winter, or give it away for gifts. Now, some people get really creative with their relish. They say, one person says, I don't like all that sugar in the sweet relish, so does one without the sugar, but does use some apples, some chopped up Granny Smith or other kind of tart apples, and along with the other things that we mentioned, onion, peppers. If you want to make it a little hotter, you could add some jalapeno peppers, some chopped cilantro, some cumin, and that'll be more like a green tomato salsa. And again, you can keep that in the refrigerator after you've cooked it up for several weeks, but you could also do the canning in a boiling water bath. Now, I do recommend, if you are going to use the boiling water bath, generally you're going to use 5 minutes or more when it's boiling, but you might go online to canning information and get the exact recipe and the exact information. Well, how about a couple of other ideas for green tomatoes? Now, this is one that I've heard people talk about, never again have tried. Like I said, I've done the pickle relish one and I thought it turned out very well. But how about green tomato pie? The report is that it tastes somewhat like apple pie because you basically put in much of the same ingredients. In addition to the sliced up green tomatoes, you're going to add some lemon juice, some cinnamon, sugar, cornstarch, butter, you know, the usual things that you put in an apple pie. Bake it pretty much like an apple pie. Well, if you're brave, or maybe you've already done that and really appreciate that kind of flavor and that use of green tomatoes. One last thing to think about is that there are some ways to ripen green tomatoes, and I think this especially works if they're sort of on the edge of getting ripe, that they're not hard, really green tomatoes, and they will not quite have the same nice fresh tomato flavor that you cherish in the summertime, but it's one way of sort of extending the tomatoes that you can get locally out of your garden or from farmers market. And one of the ways it's suggested, this can be either done in a paper bag or a plastic bag or even a jar, is to add some ripening bananas to the sack full or container full of green tomatoes. Now again, they're probably best if they're not just really hard green tomatoes but are on their way. But basically bananas work because like other fruits, all ripening fruits produce ethylene, but bananas produce much more. So when they are combined with these other things like tomatoes, or could be even peppers, they just help that ripening process along. Now, sometimes we don't want things to ripen more quickly, but in this case they will really help that ripening along. And you know what? If nothing else, this makes a great science experiment for the kids, and perhaps another way to encourage them to learn more about fruits and vegetables and add a few more to their what they eat. Couple of warnings when you're trying to ripen tomatoes, whichever way you choose. You know, and if they're almost ripe, of course, you can just set them on your windowsill and let them ripen. Try to use them soon because they will continue to lose flavor even in the refrigerator. But back to the warning, remember that you will not want to have this in a high humidity area because that will just increase how fast they will then spoil. So think about these various ways. The other way to ripen tomatoes that I've tried and with some success, and that's wrapping them in newspaper, putting them in a cardboard box, a basket, whatever, putting them in a relatively cool area and wait for them to ripen for several weeks, sometimes several months. Well, in my experience, they did. Some of them ripened, some of them spoiled, and they were tomatoes, but just sort of a teaser for what the real summertime tomatoes are. One last tip on terms of ripening, this would be an interesting one to try, is that you dig up the whole plant and shake off some of the soil, and it's okay if you cut the roots, of course, and set the whole plant in a rather cool area, and you may find that the tomatoes that are there that were in the process of ripening will continue to ripen and give you some tomatoes that are not green tomatoes. So just a few things about green tomatoes. Maybe you say, when summer's over, I'm done with my tomatoes, that's it. But in case you want to just try a few things, well, there's a few suggestions for green tomatoes. So, until next time, experience is not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you.